Start. Sweet. Cool. Yeah, we got to get you a new laptop. You still got the old one that they gave you over at Denver?
Yeah, that those Dell laptops, which are actually pretty nice, but
The mic's
right
not or
now,
the video's not working, you said.
no, the camera doesn't work. Something's going on with that. It's been going on since we first got them.
Really? See, they got to fix that because they don't know how much they're really leaving on the table when people can't see your beautiful face, right?
That's true.
I
That's
know.
true.
I know, man. All right, dude. Well, thank you for your time. This is I think this is called the Grounded Performance Podcast. To be honest, I don't know yet. I haven't uploaded anything. I had Eric on 2 days ago. If anybody's listening, and also no guarantees that anybody will ever listen to this, Moss. So take that for what you will. I might just be wasting an hour, hour and a half of your time, just like old times. So really nothing new to you. But as the Grounded Performance Podcast, our goal is to kind of make elite performance knowledge and experience by people like Massimo Gioffre here accessible to all so that everyone can feel younger and perform better. And I know that was a thing that like we would always get into, dude. We always loved talking, or I always loved talking to you about sprinting. And one of the best things about sprinting and working out was it just keeps you young.
It does.
So for everybody who doesn't know, this is Massimo Gioffre. He's a assistant director over at University of Denver Sports Performance. I learned a lot from this dude. It took a lot of money and a lot of favors that I had to call in to get this guy booked on this
Oh
session.
yeah.
This guy's been at Boston University, Montana State. You were at Iowa with football 2 years before I was at Grand
Correct.
Canyon University, and now you're back at University of Denver, which you had a couple stints at Denver.
My first ever internship was at Denver. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oddly enough, we kind of have a very close network unintentionally, right? Like you were
We
at
do.
Denver for a while. You met you met Tim there?
No, me and Tim were GAs at Boston's. Actually, I was an intern when Tim was doing his first year GA at BU. Then I became a GA. Tim got hired on as an assistant, and then Tim left for Denver. And then I ended up taking Tim's job at Denver after I took his job at BU. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's funny how the world works.
No, 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 it really is. Yeah, and yeah, we both spent time at Iowa, which was those are long hours. Those are long days working on the football side of things, but you do learn so much about how to run a session. I think they had their system down really well.
Yeah, we always used to joke that it was the closest I'd get to joining the military was my time at Iowa for three
Dude,
months there. But yeah, that's why I went there was I wanted to see a Big Ten program function and operate at the highest level. And there's probably no better place to be at the time when I was there. It was Chris Doyle, Ray Braithwaite, Cody Myers, and a couple assistants there as well. I believe it was Mark Wiseman and Pete Remies was another guy there as well. And they were all smart, brilliant guys. And they all worked well together under that system of Iowa football that's been established for, I think, 24, 25 years under Chris Doyle and Kirk Ferentz. So it was cool to see how they operated and the athletes they developed. They're kind of like Denver in the sense of they didn't get 5-star, 4-star recruits. The beauty in that model was they developed their athletes. They brought them in as maybe 1, 2-star guys, not highly touted out of high school, maybe some small farm town Iowa boys coming into their football program and they go off to be first round draft picks in the NFL. So it's cool to see. And there's definitely some commonalities between how Iowa operates the football program and has how Denver operates as an athletics program overall. So that was pretty cool to see.
yeah, yeah. I think that was one of the things that I loved most, not only about Denver but about Iowa, was how high of a level they compete at despite the athletes that they may get. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're still phenomenal athletes, right? But like you said, they're not these top end 5-star recruits. They just get some gritty guys. They get the right guys that are usually a little bit more local and they just develop the hell out of them. And it's so cool to see. And it was one of the first teams that I saw at the college level that seemed so player led that the expectations weren't to be a cheerleader or cheer them on or motivate them. That all came internally within them, and they talked to each other. They held each other accountable, and at the end of each session, they would talk about what went well and what didn't, what they need to work on. Don't get me wrong; the coaches would chime in at some points when needed, but it was a really cool thing to see.
It was. It really was.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's not to take anything away from the big schools who have dominated sports. I mean, they're that way for a reason, but it's cool to see almost the opposite side where you have to have really good systems in place and a really good staff that knows how to develop people really well and make the most of what they have at hand to continue competing at the level with everybody else. So I was
100%.
fortunate to I think we were both fortunate to kind of work at both those schools because like you said, you learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot from those 2 schools, and when I came back to Denver, it was one of the biggest things that was like a motivator was I didn't feel like I had learned everything that there was to learn from all you guys. Props to Shaw. Shaw's put together a great staff over there.
No, he has, and I think it's more so than what happens on the floor practically as a coach. I think what he's done a brilliant job at is creating this buy-in from administration, both from the coaches as well as financially from, people across campus, or people who make those things work, and allow us to invest in resources that allow us to push our department higher and higher, and better our athletes. So he's the best at that than I ever been around, bar none. It's cool to see how he's created that environment at Denver where the coaches truly value and believe in what we do as a sports performance staff, probably more than anywhere in the country, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and part of it's gotta come from success, but have you noticed any other things that he does that has created that buy-in?
I think it's how knowledgeable and witty he is, and his ability to influence coaches in a way that gets them to believe in what we do and the value we provide, and not just the X's and O's and lifting weights and training and this and that, but how we can have an impact in the athlete's career at the University of Denver. And if you look at college athletics, it's first and foremost about providing a great experience for the student athlete. And part of that experience is obviously pushing them to get better and this and that, and coaching them well and coaching them hard. But it's also relating to them as a person and who they are as an individual, and trying to maybe figure out some things about them as a person to allow them to reach a different level of performance.
Yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
Shaw does. That's what Shaw does a great job at.
Yeah, you put that really well, and I remember one of the things that when Tim was there, Tim was for anybody who's listening, Tim Murray, a solid, really intelligent guy that was part of Denver my first time around, and Moss knows him pretty well too. I learned a lot from Tim just as much as I did with Moss here. Tim would always say that social sciences have been around far before the realm of strength and conditioning, something along those lines, but just understanding people in general is the first step and maybe the biggest piece of the pie when it comes to being a coach. And I think there's a lot to that. And I think you touched on it really well, but I think there's a lot to that.
I think that's any profession, whether you're an executive at a big business, you're a teacher at an elementary school, whatever that may be. It's about understanding the people you work with and serve,
Yeah.
and that's how you unlock performance, is by learning who that person is.
Dude, in service, you just talked about and serve. Yeah, I think in the realm of coaches, we've all come across a coach, whether that be at the high school level, college, anywhere, that maybe has a very large ego and that can kind of get lost. That as a coach, you are of service to others. And I think that's a important thing to keep at the forefront of the mind and to demonstrate, but not say necessarily. I think there's a way to say it to your athletes to try and get by and like, hey, I'm just here to help you. I'm just here for the people who want to be here. I'm here to try and help you take this as far as you can. But also the demonstration, I think, is where it gets tough, showing them how much you care. And yeah, I think that's something that really separates good coaches or okay coaches from great coaches.
Yeah, I agree, and it doesn't have to be this drastic investment. It can be a few minutes here and there of making yourself available for the athlete across the week. It's as simple as that. Making time to talk. Maybe they want to come in and do a little extra work, and you take 15, 20 minutes of your time to be with them and spend with them. And it's probably less about the execution of that time in terms of what we're doing practically as a coach. Maybe it's more about just chatting up with them, and finding out who they are. That's probably more important at that time, because it's the one-on-one time you have with them, that versus spending one on 50 with a team of lacrosse guys for me. So I get to spend a little bit more time with that one or two, three guys in that 15, 20 minutes they come down, maybe get a little extra recovery work, footwork, whatever that may be, talk nutrition. Who knows what that is? And usually half the time we're down there, we're bullshitting and having a good time. So
Yeah.
I enjoy those times.
Yeah, yeah, and it just comes down to, like, just giving a shit. If you just give a shit about the person, usually after some time, they're gonna see that, they're gonna trust you, and you're gonna be the person that they go to for yeah, like you said, things like nutrition and extra footwork, speed, anything that they need, you kind of become their go-to guy, even more so sometimes than head coaches. As strength and conditioning professionals, you spend so much time with all these athletes, usually more time, or a lot of times more time than the head coach does, or a lot of the coaches do. So it's also just an awesome opportunity, like you said, to build relationships with really cool people and get to know these people. But I do want to get into training. Moss has been an awesome teacher to me and an awesome mentor that's taught me so much, where I go to him with whatever I have at that time. I'm overcomplicating things in my brain, and I go to Moss with this crazy question that's stressing me out, and he has always helped me formulate it simply, like understand it, grasp it in a way that I can actually use the knowledge that we're given. So I think one of the biggest things that you helped me understand was how to define a target and try and figure out what it is that you are trying to do. So, what are some of the non negotiables that you have as far as human performance training, right? Like things everyone should train regardless of sport or lifestyle.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, regardless of if you're, I know you're in the realm of general population now with athletes as well, and I'm more in the realm of collegiate athletes. So, but I think the one commonality is there is consistency in what you're doing as a person or as an athlete to achieve the results that you want. And along those lines, the other commonality I think between the two is it requires a little bit of sacrifice um, in your personal life to achieve those results. Those are the two biggest commonalities. Non-negotiables, I'd say, whether you're an athlete or general population, is first define what your goal is and what you want to accomplish. I think the general population athlete and the collegiate athlete, if I'm looking at training them in the same way or looking at certain things they both share, I'd say the biggest thing would be just general conditioning. That proves value in just general health, and that forms your foundation of general health. Um, that would be my biggest target working with both populations is, can we improve whether it's general work capacity, aerobic conditioning, just general overall good conditioning. And that has tons of value for just general health, cardiovascular health, circulatory health, whatever that may be. How you recover from sessions, how well do you sleep, how well do you function throughout the day. I think just general conditioning is the biggest one, biggest foundation for both. That's what I'd say for those two there. Secondly, like they do have different goals. An athlete is trying to reach elite performance, and maybe your general population person is just trying to maybe improve their aesthetics, maybe feel better, maybe move better. So those are two very different things there. I know one of your other questions is about training volume. We can touch on that in a little bit there, but uh, I'd say from that perspective, it's for your general population athlete, eating well is probably one of the bigger ones. And when I mean eating well, I think the first thing a general population person has to do is probably practice eating less. That's what I'd say the biggest key is learning how to eat less. And you can probably maintain the same diet that you have. If you eat less, you're probably going to improve your physique a little bit better. That's the biggest thing I'd see is where we are gluttons as Americans. That's something that's kind of in our culture. We like to eat a lot, and a lot of our gatherings that we have with our groups of friends and this and that, football now, especially in the fall, it all revolves around food and drinking.
Dude, for sure.
So maybe you do a little bit less of that. You're probably going to make some improvements with your physique.
I think you're totally right. When you think of going on vacation, anytime I go on vacation, you always come back heavier, whether that's going home for the holidays or going on vacation to some new area with your friend, significant other, whatever it is. But one of the biggest things to do is always try out food spots, and you just eat half of what you do, I swear, on vacation or off time away from home is just eat. So you're right. It's just such a big part of our culture, and we always come back heavier. You got the holiday weight, you got the vacation weight, and you're like, I got to get back into it. So that's a good point. And I like that you said you could probably even just maintain your same diet if you just eat a little bit less. Fill your plate three-quarters of the way as full as you normally do.
Yeah, I'd say, I saw an X post the other day, and I love X, or formerly known as Twitter there, but they were talking about flu season at this time of the year. And one guy said flu season, it's probably more of the sugar and fat season because you're just eating
Man,
around Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's for the next 90 days. And he was saying that's probably the root of all the sickness throughout this time of the year. And if he said he can't kind of cut out some of those calories, some of those sugary desserts, and this and that, you're probably going to remain relatively healthy through flu season, as he said. And I think he's bang on. He's right.
Dude, this is why I love talking to Moz. He just drops dimes of information. Something that if you didn't tell me that today, right now, I never would have made that connection or thought of that before. And I know, like, you gave credit that you found it out from an ex post, but I think that's an awesome piece of information. And literally in my kitchen right now, I have a pack of pumpkin cookies that I got from HEB. There's a place called HEB here. It's kind of like a Whole Foods type place. Texas has a whole bunch of HEBs, greatest grocery store ever. But you're right, when fall comes around, sweets, my friend, like I
Oh,
am
that's what these companies make their money off of.
man, and you see it right when you walk in. As soon as you walk in the doors, big displays. As soon as you're walking into line to check out, big displays, all of sweets, all of the sugary, addictive deliciousness that is maybe not that great for us. Before we get too far away from it, you talked about general conditioning, and I think that's huge. Can you define simply what that would be or how that would look if that's just hopping on a treadmill for 30 minutes? I know I used to think of general conditioning as mostly just running or jogging, right? But I don't think that's necessarily true, and I think that was one of the biggest things that I realized earlier on in my strength and conditioning journey by another great mentor that I had was conditioning, and this was from that MMA conditioning, that Joel Jameson book. Conditioning doesn't just mean running, and there's 1,000 ways to work on general conditioning. So what does that look like or mean to you?
What I'd say is, you look at general conditioning, we're looking at obviously the energy systems that we have available to train, and they all work together.
I don't think you're looking at isolating a single energy system. So I think when you look at that, I like what Steve Magnus talks about.
I don't know if he's written a couple books now. I think his biggest book is called The Science of Running, but he is an endurance coach, I believe, by trade. And he talks about breaking it down simply into a couple different things. And if you look at your training across the week, you're typically doing 2 to 3 sessions of really easy, longer steady state stuff that can be any modality of your liking. It could be hiking, jogging, biking, rowing. I personally start to use the erg a little bit more now. Stairmaster, whatever you want, elliptical. I think if you do something along those lines, steady state, where you keep your heart rate at a steady level there for, I don't know how long, 30, 40 minutes, whatever that may be, a couple times a week, you're pretty much halfway there. And then maybe the other 2 times a week, it's one thing you do is really hard, short and hard, and the other thing is maybe moderately hard. And that can come in the form of some sort of maybe aerodyne sprints, track intervals, whatever that may be, treadmill intervals, whatever you see there. Erg, you can go for meters rowed as quickly as you can, set a target distance and try to row as fast as you can in a certain amount of time there, whatever that may be. And I like how we kind of just simplified it into, hey, a couple times a week, do something
Kind of slow and easy for a longer amount of time, and the other couple times a week, it's something that's really hard and something that's a little bit more moderately challenging.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a simple way to put it. And you don't even necessarily need weights for any of that stuff. Like you said, you can just hop on a assault bike and go as hard as you can for 30 seconds. And that's miserable, right? You can find a track and you can do some type of just more intense lap for time or mile split run, whatever it is. But no, I think that's a super easy way to look at it. And I think you can even do the same thing with, right? We see it within our programming and strength and conditioning a lot. You can do the same thing with just basic movements in the weight room. You could just pair an upper body with the lower body with the core and alternate between those three for a few rounds or something. Doesn't have to be heavy. That could either be your short and hard day, that could be your moderate day, that could even be like a slow and easy day, depending, right? So Shaw over at Denver put together this 40 exercise circuit. It took about 30 minutes. We call it like the sandbell circuit.
Yep.
And it was just one set of each exercise. Some of them were single sided, but you're essentially just working continuously. And it's structured in a way that doesn't overly fatigue any one muscle group too quickly. It kind of switches between body parts, between pushes and pulls, upper and lower, really well. And that's kind of the same thing, right? That's general conditioning. And honestly, it's a tough workout if you've never done it, but the more you get accustomed to it, it honestly becomes a great recovery modality too.
Correct. I agree. And yeah, I think the mistakes people make, general population people, is that their first inclination is to go out and just start running, and that run turns into a really fast walking limp.
Versus using a different modality. And I've actually my own training gravitated as I get older. It's like anything long slow, steady state work, I'm probably doing non-impact these days, whether it's bike, elliptical, erg, whatever that may be. And then anything more interval based, whether it's moderate or really hard, I usually lend towards the track and hit out intervals on the track as well. That's kind of where I like to do my work and how I split it up throughout the week with my conditioning. And the older I get, the more I realize how much more conditioning is important than trying to PR your squat at this age. That's kind of where I gravitate towards now. And I kind of use a little bit of that Steve Magnus model I mentioned that he talks about.
One thing I think some people don't realize when they get into running, it's like, awesome, I'm going to start a new me. I'm going to create this new me and I run now and I'm going to be fit. I'm going to be consistent with this, which is great. And that's awesome. Your conditioning, your central conditioning, like your lungs and these energy systems will usually be fine and improve pretty well. But the other side of that is the muscles, tendons, ligaments, joints that don't recover in the same fashion or don't improve in the same fashion. So all those little impacts on concrete, the structural system is going to take a lot of wear and tear where the lungs can handle more and more. And that's usually when injuries start setting in. I think surface is always a big variable within conditioning that gets left out. Shin splints and strains, all those little impacts coming from concrete add up way more than they do if you were to run on even a track but grass, right? Surface plays like a big part. I always like to get to a field if I'm going to do any intense running just because of how unforgiving some surfaces are on your joints.
I totally agree. Actually, I've dealt with a little bit of this Achilles tendinopathy because I was doing our lacrosse summer program that I sent to the guys, the field work and the running. And I was realizing that I did it all summer on a track and I never varied the surface of maybe going from turf or grass to back to the track or maybe even a little bit of road or concrete work. And I realized that over time, just not varying the surface potentially could have led to just the overuse on the Achilles here and some things I was dealing with late in the summer when I was doing that program. So I do agree is varying surface is one, varying impact-based modalities with non-impact-based modalities, I think is important. And again, you're working with a population where you've probably had someone come into your gym now these days and they haven't trained in 5 years and they want to get back to looking like this and 20 or 25-year-old self. And they go out and they run a mile and they come back all banged up. Shins are hurting, calves tight. Maybe they have a little strain going on this and that. What happens is they do that and 2-3 weeks down the road, they quit and they
Yeah.
stop their fitness journey there because it got too hard or because they didn't properly prepare themselves for it.
Yeah, the consistency, like you said, is huge, which I love. Like when you have the fire inside you and you're ready to make a change, that's awesome. The hard part is staying consistent with it a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, and not burning yourself out too. Yeah, I think that's another thing we could probably talk about forever. One other thing, I want to make sure we get to a couple of these other things. You did a good job explaining that at the end of the day, we're really just after a stimulus, and it doesn't take a shit ton of reps and a shit ton of sets and going till failure on all these different things and just making something hard for the purpose of it being hard to get what it is that we're after. How much training volume do you think is necessary for an athlete compared to the general population, right? A busy professional who wants to stay healthy and energetic and feel younger.
Yeah, I'd say that, obviously you're looking at two totally different tasks of what they're working towards. You look at your athlete, let's just use the example of our collegiate athlete is, they're preparing to practice 5-6 days a week on top of playing the game once or twice a week, depending on what sport you play with. So they have to train their body to be able to handle that workload demand. Now you look at your general population person, they're probably 90% of the time is they spend their time sedentary, sitting at a desk, whatever that may be. Maybe you have a blue collar guy who knows who's up and moving around a bit. Now you're looking at two totally different tasks that they're trying to work towards there. So I'd say obviously the volume of training for an athlete's going to be a lot higher versus your sedentary normal everyday person. And when you look at your sedentary normal everyday person, I think it goes back to our conversation. What are their goals? If their goals are aesthetics, to look better, feel better, kind of feel a little bit younger, be a little bit more energized and just feel better throughout their workday. You probably don't have to do too much. You're probably looking at lifting 2-3 days a week, doing a couple conditioning sessions a couple days a week, right? And you're just teaching them maybe how to eat a little bit better and sleep a little bit better and handle their lifestyle. On the flip side, you look at your athlete now, and we've always talked about, and I think I've said this to you before, is training is a little bit of a double-edged sword. The more you do, right, the chances are you maybe have the potential to increase your performance. But on the other side of that, the more you do, the chances are you probably are going to increase your risk of injury. And we talked about how we always train to get kids bigger, faster, stronger. And we always use this term injury prevention or risk of injury reduction. But if you think about it, if you're getting someone faster, you're getting someone bigger, getting someone stronger, they're expressing higher rates of forces, they're running down at a higher velocity, at a higher mass, and now they're going to collide into someone, chances are you're probably increasing the risk of injury there. So I think that's a key determinant in training an athlete versus training a general population person. Who for them, they come to see you, they don't want to get hurt. Obviously, our athletes try to keep them as healthy as possible, but if you don't want to get hurt playing on the in your sport, then don't play a sport. So that's a key determinant. I want to differentiate between the two. Again, with your athlete, you're working backwards from the demands of the game. What are the general demands that you have to prepare them for? Maybe across your practice week as well. And then also, what are some of the specific positional requirements and what they demand of the athlete? And that's going to depend on the sport you play and the position within that sport you play. So obviously, we both worked at football. You look at some of those positions there, closer to the ball, more mass, more size, more opposition of another person's mass that you have to move. Maybe you're further away from the ball. Your skill guys, leaner, faster, more agile. So you're looking to train them relative to the demands that they have to experience. Now, there are some commonalities between the two. You do want to get generally stronger, generally more powerful and faster, and increase your level of conditioning. And I'd say the same for your general population is, you do want to get them generally stronger and generally more fit. So there are differences between the two, but there are some slight commonalities as well.
When it comes to training and training volume, I used to just think in the weight room, because especially when an athlete is in season, even out of season, it doesn't take much. 2 sets to 3 sets on a lot of different exercises, a lot of times will be fine. Other times you can go much harder when practice volumes are lower, when they're practicing less. I think one thing that I needed to remind myself of was that everything is a stressor. Stress doesn't come just from the weight room, but how much they're practicing absolutely needs to be taken into account. That is training volume. And how many games they're playing is training volume. So just because maybe they're only lifting a couple times a week for only a couple sets, for only a couple reps in those sets each week, doesn't mean that their training volume is necessarily low. So I think if people were to ever try and mimic what individuals or athletes are doing at an elite level and only see the weight room portion of it, they're missing a massive piece of the pie. So that's not to say that maybe you only need 2 sets of 5 reps. When you're getting started, doesn't take much. But that's also not to say that the human body can't handle massive amounts of volume when trained properly. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. And I think I look at it as more of like a controlled burn for the athlete
Mm-hmm.
versus just taking a flamethrower to them,
Yeah.
Because even though if you're only, let's say you're lifting 2-3 days a week, maybe you're in season, you're lifting twice a week, sometimes 1 day a week, you can blow them up depending on what you do.
Oh, yeah.
Because we do remember that even general population and student athletes, they all pull from the same energy resource. The only thing is for the student athlete, that resource is becoming expended from practice, from class schedules, academic stressors, from film study. That's another big stressor, even though it's not physical, it is mentally taxing.
Mhm.
And then from your training as well. And then who knows all the extra work they do off to the side
away from you and the coaches. And I know we have a couple of guys who do that. So I think the biggest thing to look at is the athlete's burning the candle at both ends. It's just you're helping control that burn on one of those ends so they don't get to that end as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's really well put. I remember a while ago you also said you can always add more, but as soon as you go over, you can't undo it.
I think I took that from a guy named Keir Wenham Flat. I think he goes by rugby strength coach. I heard him say it. I'm sure he's not the only one who said it, but I believe it's you rather undershoot by a mile than overshoot by an inch.
Yeah,
Um,
no, well put. I think that's, at least for me, something that took me a little bit to learn. I know my first internship at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I thought that athletes should have been pushed so much harder in the weight room, where it was like maybe just a poor mentality I had of going as hard as you can every single day for what it does to your mind and your body will catch up. Not true. Definitely not true. What are some of like the bigger mistakes that you may have made early on in your own training or coaching others?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being way too weight room centric, where I thought all of our improvements come just from the squat rack,
Mhm.
and adding a ton of volume there. And that's when I met a coach by the name of Boo Snyder, who is a legendary track and field coach. I'm sure you know who he is. We've talked about him. He's been at LSU for all those years, training Olympians and gold medalists and whatnot, at the collegiate level and at the pro level as well. But I spent the whole day with him and I watched him train his sprinters. I watched him take an athlete through RTP who was coming from an injury. I watched him just kind of coach kids up in the weight room, coach kids up out in the track, and it was eye opening. And he talked me through kind of his whole model, his whole design, and it wasn't very weight room centric. He was talking to me about sprint volumes and different phases of the sprint and how to train those and the plyometric volumes and the ebb and flow between those two and how they mesh well with the weight room. And he almost seemed to make it as the weight room was tertiary in the hierarchy of sprinting and field work and plyometrics and all that stuff. And that's when I got right back to my desk as a GA, and I started rewriting everything I've done with my field sport athletes, and not trying to make it track and field centric now, but trying to understand, okay, I'm missing a big boat in all the benefits that you get from sprinting, all the benefits that you get from plyometric and jump training, and then how you can utilize the weight room to support those improvements. I think was key in my development as a coach. Early on, as young strength coaches, we always make the mistake of, we have to increase our squat max and increase it early and often. And the only way to do that is to add a ton of volume. Volume is going to get you stronger because you're just doing it so much over and over. You're increasing the amount of tonnage that you're lifting throughout the year, accumulating a ton of workload under a bar. Now, the flip side is athletes got really strong. The downside is athletes didn't jump high or run very fast anymore. It was funny. I think I was working with my tennis team. It was the first team I ever got to program for, my first year as GA. And I remember we tested jumps and sprints week 1. We didn't touch jumps or sprints till like week 8 or 10. And we just squatted and got really strong, deadlifted, all that stuff. We went to test week 9 and 10. I believe our jump numbers were lower and our sprint numbers were lower. Negatively lower, not a positive improvement. And I looked at that. I was like, man, what am I doing wrong here? And that meeting was eye opening with that coach, allowing me to understand that you can create the stimulus that we talked about, not just by getting under the bar, but by sprinting, by doing high intensity plyometrics, by doing high intensity jumping, and how to vary those throughout the year and how they ebb and flow with your weight room program.
Yeah, and I think one thing, I mean, me and you are both huge nerds when it comes to sprinting. I think we're both fascinated by the art of it, the biomechanics of it, the physics of it. It's super cool. And one of my favorite facts is that in sprinting at top speed, right, when you hit your fastest 10-meter to 20-meter span, which can usually only last about that distance or under 2 seconds, you're producing, at least elite sprinters are producing between 3 and 6 times their body weight on a single leg. So you think about squatting 3 to 6 times your body weight on 2 legs, which I would never be able to attain anything anywhere close to that. But you're producing that same amount of force on a single leg in that segment of a sprint, which I think is so valuable, right? It's something you can't mimic in anything else that a human can really do, at least as far as I know. That cannot be mimicked in any other movement, in any other pattern, in any other way other than sprinting at top speed. And if you think about strength, I think simply I kind of think of it as the ability to produce force. And if you're producing that much force, you're producing a lot of strength and you're getting a massive strength adaptation just sprinting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just, if you look at training, if you look at skill, it's about how you're expressing force. And we can express force through a multitude of ways. We can vary that expression of force. We can do it simply through weightlifting, right? We can do it through different demands of coordination through Olympic weightlifting. We can do it through heavy grinding lifts. We can do it even through muscular endurance based lifts that are high volume oriented. And all we're doing is really just changing the way of how we are expressing that force. And the same goes for sprinting, right? And now we're looking at expressing the highest amount of forces possibly under the highest velocities and probably under one of the more demanding levels of coordination, moving at a high velocity and having your body in sync as you strike that floor, as you cycle in the air. How does your body interact with the ground? How does your body reposition itself in the air? And that's kind of the art of sprinting. And I think,
we make a mistake as coaches to where we want every athlete to have this picture perfect sprint position. And I don't think that's true, especially for team sport athletes. Maybe a little bit more for your track and field athletes where their goal is to run as fast as they can. But you have all these team sport athletes who, they play different sports growing up. They're, different limb lengths, different anthropometrics, different builds. They're all going to sprint relatively differently from one another. And I see it every day with lacrosse. Time our sprints on Wednesdays are how our taller guys sprint versus smaller guys, how our stronger guys sprint versus our weaker guys, how our springier guys sprint versus our maybe our more heavy force dominant guys. And sometimes like they'll have different mechanics when they sprint, and they'll both sprint pretty fast. It's funny how it works. And I think that's the art of sprinting that fascinates me. Just looking at the different strategies these athletes have innately that allows them to sprint at really high speeds. And the mistakes I made early on when it came to sprinting, then once I first started diving into it more, was coaching every athlete the same. And now it's almost there. Whereas I take a step back and look at what allows them to sprint faster, and I kind of just maybe give a couple cues here and there, but I'm actually learning more from how they sprint versus them learning from me how to sprint, if that makes sense, because they're the ones that have been doing it now since they've been a kid sprinting. So now it's ingrained in their nervous system of how they sprint in a certain way. So now I'm just trying to learn a little bit more from them and maybe give them cues that help the way they sprint versus maybe helping, a different kid.
Someone, I forget who I was listening to, and I thought they put it a really good way where I think the question was, how much should you coach up a sprint? And he related it to, well, how much do you coach up a squat, right? Do you try and fix every little thing of a squat? Or are there kind of overarching principles that you think are good to maintain? Maybe like a neutral spine position, different angles, right? Depending on the person. And I think you're right. It's going to depend on the individual a lot. So as you're coaching a session or running a session, maybe throwing out a couple cues where it is needed to certain individuals. Even when it comes to a squat, you think caving in knees are bad, right? But one of my old mentors was also explaining to me he doesn't cave in his knees. It looks like he's caving in his knees, but his whole leg is kind of rotating in because that's how he produces power. He kind of internally rotates and his legs kind of turn into that coil almost. And he said that's the same way he sprints, and that's what makes him really fast. So, am I going to try and change his squat because his knees technically move in? No, I think it's actually what makes him a really good athlete. And yeah, you touched on that too, how much you learn from them, right? I think for anybody whoever just wants to get into coaching or personal training, whatever it is, at whatever level, try and put yourself in an environment where you just see hundreds of reps, right? For us, it was interning at different schools where you just see many different athletes, even performing the same exercise a multitude of different ways. One thing I've noticed in the private sector now is people define an exercise so specifically. Bulgarians, you're supposed to do Bulgarians exactly like this, or this is done this way, or this is done this way. But it comes back to what you were saying of defining a target where it's almost, well, why am I programming this exercise? Well, I want to have maybe a hip dominant lower body push. And if I'm getting that out of this exercise in a safe way, it's doing its job. And there's all these tiny little details, like I don't know, all these things that I don't think matter anymore. But sometimes we can get carried away with all these tiny little details just because we heard it or saw it defined that way before, and we kind of lose sight of the bigger picture, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I agree. I totally agree.
What do you think are some of the more underrated truths about fitness or performance training or fitness or performance in general that you wish more people understood or that you wish you knew earlier? Or things that you just wish were general knowledge to everybody, almost just a dime of information, a nugget where it made so many things click. I know one thing was the value of sprint training plyometrics in your previous answer. Are there any other things that you found out along the way where you just thought, man, everybody needs to know this, or I wish everybody knew this?
Honestly, I think it comes back to just being consistent with what you do as a person. Where I see the issue today is there is a ton of information out there
Hmm.
through social media, blogs, vlogs, YouTube, whatever that may be. You look at all this information, it's very surface level just because the human mind just can't process more now, I guess, today than a minute or two of information at a time. It seems like with what these algorithms have shown to be true for YouTube and Instagram, all the stuff here, I'd say people get lost in a lot of the weeds of this information that's being put out there, and that doesn't allow them to be consistent anymore. Now they're jumping from program to program, trying this thing out, trying that thing out. I think you see this with diets, fad diets, and fad trainings. Obviously, High Rocks is the big one. Now today, at one point it was CrossFit.
Hmm.
So there's all these different fads today with how to eat, which diet to do, what type of training to do today. I wish someone told me early on it's not that hard. It really is not that hard. It's not as hard as just training 3 days a week, eating a lot of protein, sleeping well. And unfortunately, no one wants to believe that. And I think it's an underrated truth because it's so simple and it's not complex enough to comprehend that it doesn't have to be as hard as it seems.
I was just telling, so I work at that soccer academy, and we got this kid, awesome kid. He's like, "Well, how do I get faster?" And he's just weak. I don't mean that in a mean way. He has a lot of strength that he could gain, and if he gets stronger relative to his body weight, he will be faster. And I tried to explain that to him, like, "Listen, man, you just need to get stronger." But everyone's always looking for that secret, that secret pill or that secret answer, but it's never a secret answer or a secret little sauce that nobody has. It's just a very basic, simple list that nobody does. I think Hermosi has a good quote along those lines. It's not a secret that nobody has. It's a basic list that nobody does consistently, like you were saying, and it's so true. I find myself down that same rabbit hole sometimes. You look for this secret that's going to solve whatever problem that you have, but it's those things that you said: train 3 times a week, eat pretty well, and get good sleep. And most things are going to get better.
100%. And it's funny. It's like now the big fad recently has been, I think Rogan's popularized it too, was sauna and cold plunge and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
you see a lot of athletes starting to do it now. I think one of our lacrosse players just actually put a sauna in his house now, his off campus house.
Yeah.
Listen, that's all great.
Sure.
But like thinking you're gonna hop in a plunge for 3, 4, 5 minutes, maybe once or twice a week, maybe you try doing it every day, sitting in the sauna for 20, 30 minutes is gonna undo all the bullshit you do incorrectly throughout your lifestyle. And I think that's where the dialogue's been lost, and understanding a little bit more in depth about, what really gives you the true benefits. It always dials back to eating well and sleeping well, training hard, doing all the right things the right way. That's what gets you the results. And like we mentioned early on, I think the biggest thing that requires is a bit of sacrifice. And that's the hardest thing a person wants to give up, and sacrifice a part of their life to achieve a certain result. And as you know, being now a business owner, and I'm sure Hormozy's talked about this too. I love the information she puts out, but a lot of this side hustle stuff, a lot of succeeding in life comes down to making a sacrifice. And those who are willing to make that sacrifice will achieve the outcome they want at some point. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen in a month or a year. It may take 10, 15, 20 years to do it. But at a certain point, you make that sacrifice. Now you're all in it. You have to be consistent with it. And it goes back to our other topic, consistency. If you can do those two things, I think you're going to be pretty successful as a person in life, whether that's in sport, business, whatever that may be.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything in your life that you find helps you maintain consistency?
Yeah, man, it's battling that person in your head that tells you to stay in bed, sleep that extra hour, or you don't have to work out today, or you don't have to get any extra work done today. Just take that time off. I think you're always having that internal battle, especially I think as a man too. I think the human mind is going to be eased by comfort and complacency. We don't want to be pushed above that habitual threshold often as that person. So I think for me, obviously this is personal, but it's like I get a little bit of that anxiety in the morning when I wake up and I sleep in. I hit snooze on my alarm, and now that person in me is saying, "Oh, you could stay in bed, or you can be a little bit of a bitch, or you can get up and get your work done. Get up and go work out, start your day off with a little bit more vitality." I think is important. If there's any secrets to that on my end, obviously I've made training a part of my lifestyle. Obviously you get older, you get married, and obviously you want to plan to have kids at some point. Being able to secure your family and your significant other and a kid
is going to give you a little bit more of that internal battle in your head there. And it's going to force you to go out and do some things and give you a little bit, maybe a little bit more motivation to provide that security for that person in your life, or for that family you want to eventually have. So I think that's something that you gain as you grow older. Yeah, I don't know if there's any secret to it, but just getting up and doing the work, man. I don't have this crazy morning routine where I wake up and ground for 20 minutes and write my meditations in my journal and plunge for 5 minutes and then do this and that. I kind of just wake up and get to work.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is the secret sometimes, or it could be looked at as one, just making it a part of who you are. I know I battle with reasoning that maybe I get really poor sleep and I will do better that day if I just get some more sleep and then I'll be more productive. But that's a slippery slope, because when is it too much? When is it a lack of discipline to just keep going even though you're tired?
Yeah, and I think that's what leads to inconsistency right
Oh,
there.
yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so a little bit of a hard tangent. Assuming that you had to restart your fitness journey completely with no consistent training background at your current age, how would you approach it?
Yeah, listen, if you're ready to go buy a house, who's the first person you're going to seek for help? You need a realtor, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. You get sick, who do you go see?
The doctor.
A doctor. So if you want to start a fitness journey without any prior knowledge of how to do so, I'm going to go hire a professional who's good at it. I'm going to go and maybe talk to someone who maybe owns a local gym or knows someone who's a really good trainer. And I'm going to go work with them and learn from them and have them train me. That's going to be my goal, especially as a person who's starting a fitness journey with no prior knowledge whatsoever. And I think, again, looking at fitness professionals, we have a skill that we need to monetize. And you're doing that now. I've been doing it a little bit on the side privately with training, youth athletes one-on-one. So I think the key is for us as professionals is learning how to monetize our skill, because there's people out there who, you just posed the question to me, there's probably more often than not who don't know anything about training, who want to return to their 20-year-old self. Maybe they were an athlete in high school, maybe they weren't. Maybe they've seen a picture of themselves lately and they didn't look too good in it. Maybe they're not attractive enough to the opposite sex. So for them, it's about going to seek the professional who's really good at what they do and pay them to do it well. And the return on investment is the health and wellness that you're going to gain from them.
My goal that I try and keep at the front of my brain anytime we get a new member, I would like to think that you technically only would need us for 6 months to a year. And I hope you have all the knowledge you need then to go live life however you want. You have the ability to live life however you want, and you have built the consistency and enough knowledge to do that on your own. I hope you stay because you enjoy it and enjoy the community. But I think that's exactly right. Like finding somebody who just knows what they're talking about. And sometimes we sacrifice our health for a career or a certain amount of money or complacency, whatever it is, right? We sacrifice our health for something and then it catches up to you. And all you want to do is try and buy your health and youth back. So the sooner you start that, the better off you're going to be. I mean, I think we all know that it's simple. What would you do differently, right? And we've kind of talked about this a little bit. How would you program differently for a college athlete versus a busy professional or someone who just wants to feel good? They want to play sports recreationally. They want to go on hikes. They want to play with their kids, right? And I think with that comes some fast twitch movements that I see a lot of people fear nowadays, right? It just takes myself too, one small movement in the wrong direction, you throw out your back or neck or whatever it is. If you're just trying to build an overall capable human being, how would your programming change, say, between a freshman that's never seen the weight room before and a busy professional?
Yeah, I think the skeleton of what you do can remain the same for that, freshman novice athlete who walked through the door for the first time versus your, 30-year-old desk worker who walked through your gym doors for the first time. You're going to do everything under the sun in terms of, can we improve mobility and flexibility? Can we improve general strength? Can we improve conditioning? And with that said, obviously with your general population athlete, or a general population person, maybe you're not going to go and do a ton of sprinting with them. Maybe you're going to do a little bit of it, but versus your athlete who's 18 years old and sprinting is a big motor task within their sport, we have to train that aspect. So again, there's some commonalities,
of how we do it, there's going to be some differences. Obviously, like we mentioned, that youth athlete who is starting his freshman year of college, competing maybe at the Division I level, there's a physical barrier of entry they need to meet in order to play that game at a high level. So they got to be big enough, fast enough, strong enough, conditioned enough to play this game at a high level. Your desk jockey doesn't have to be big enough, fast enough, strong enough. What they need to do is just be able to move a little bit better and feel a little bit better. And you can accomplish that through a multitude of ways. How many ways can you vary a squat? Obviously, vary a squat so many different ways. You're going to move in all three planes with your desk jockey like you probably want to do with your collegiate athlete. You're obviously going to simplify those ways you do it. There's a motor learning task involved in both sides for the kids who maybe haven't trained enough, or the kid or the desk jockey who hasn't trained at all. So again, taking into the aspect of you want them to move really well, and you want to make these small incremental improvements throughout their time with you is important. So yeah, like I said, I think the skeleton remains the same. You're going to do probably levels of strength and power with them. You're going to do levels of conditioning with them, maybe some certain level of speed training with them. But again, that's going to vary based on what the goals are for that general population person versus your athlete. And like we talked about, your athlete, they have to repeat higher outputs throughout the duration of the game or across the week of a practice. So you're preparing them to repeat those outputs at a high level over and over again and help them recover from it. Versus your desk jockey, they're gonna be a little bit different. They don't have to go out and sprint around a field all day and get hit by someone else. They got to go to a desk and do their work, sit at the computer all day, whatever that may be. And maybe they're coming in for an hour after they worked 10 hours a day to see you and help them function better and feel better. So we're teetering a line of working with athletes of really trying to push the edge of performance, and we're teetering the line with desk jockeys and general population, just making them feel a little bit better every day they come in.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like it's almost just about, in both situations, providing a wide variety of qualities that you want to work on. Maybe you need certain qualities emphasized more within the collegiate athlete population, even within your general person. There's only so many things that the human body can do, and I think they can be consolidated under basic like buckets, such as, yeah, mobility, flexibility, strength, conditioning, speed, and power. So if you just touch on those things, even just a little bit, you can get a lot out of your training. And like you said, it really doesn't take much to feel a lot better, feel a lot younger, move better, stay healthier, and feel more capable.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking, when you first open up your gym, you're talking about how to kind of design your week of training for your clients. And speed and power, I know you do like a dynamic day on Tuesday and Thursdays, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And it looked like from some of your videos, they come in and they do skipping and hopping and stuff like that. And
Oh, yeah.
and for them, that's their speed work probably.
Mhm.
But for your athlete, yeah, at some point, you're gonna have to sprint at high velocities and
Yeah.
decel at high velocities as well. So again, like that principle is the same. It's just a matter of what is the dose you're giving your general client, and what is the dose that the athlete needs to be successful at their sport. And I think that's where the X's and O's become a little bit different. But again, it's still under that same umbrella of speed and power, or that principle that you want to work it under.
For sure, for sure. Dude, Moss, thank you so much for your time. Maybe I said this at the beginning. Every day I would essentially come into the office at University of Denver and I would have something I needed to ask Moss and take up too much of his time with. And I miss those days because I learned so much, and I know it took a lot away from your job, but I feel like I got a little bit of that time back. I haven't got to do that in over a year and a half, so I finally got to ask you a whole bunch of questions again and just pick your brain. I always learned so much from you, and I always have to give a lot of credit to the knowledge that I have now. I still don't know shit, right? I still have a lot that I would love to learn, but a lot of what I do know has come from you. So I'm very thankful to have had you as a resource, even up till now, but especially along my journey in the college side of things, because I would be in a much different place if I didn't have you, along with others, but especially you to learn from. So I appreciate your time, not only today, but with all the time in your life that I've definitely wasted asking a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, man. Listen, I remember being a young coach and emailing a bunch of coaches I wanted to learn from, and either I didn't get a reply back for them, or they just had too busy of a schedule. So
Yeah.
I think it's important. We talked about serving others. Well, I think you want to serve the people who are a part of your life, and if you can impart a little knowledge or wisdom on them, or even learn from them. I learned as much from you as you did from me. Same with Eric. We've always had these little random meetings pop up here and there. but I think it's always a special time to learn from one another and make the time for that person as well.
Yeah, even Shaw, I think I sent him a text, a thank you text a while ago, seeing now how tough it is and how busy days can get when, you're trying to build something like he was. He always made the time as well, and I just wonder, I'm like, "Man, how did you make time within your day for me to annoy you for an hour, hour and a half?" And that was one of the few hours or hour and a halves that you had that day to do so many other things. So it's been I've been very lucky to work for people who make that time. Is there anything, I know you were putting together a book, Jacked Golfers or Golfers Getting Jacked. Is there
Jacked
any
on the course, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think that's awesome. And you motivated me to like start creating other resources that could help anybody. Is there anything you're working on currently?
No, not right now. I spent more time just trying to build out the private side of training with
Yeah.
all these youth athletes I've had.
Come through the doors now in the evenings throughout the year, and that's been fun for me because I do enjoy coaching and being on the floor, but I do got to get better at pursuing the online portion of it, creating content, building content, and ultimately trying to maybe sell content is probably the key. It seems that's where fitness is trending these days. So I don't have anything to point anyone towards now. I do got to release that book at some point because it's been done for years now.
Yeah.
I just haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I got to get my golf game a little bit better before I can talk the talk and walk the walk there. So
Exactly.
that's what it is right now.
Well, anybody who's listening to this, and no promises that anybody is listening to this, Moss, where can they find you if they want to learn more from you, if they want to see more from your training? Where can they find you?
Yeah, reach out to me on Instagram. I think my handle is Uno Mas, and then
Yeah.
I gotta see what. Oh, I think my X handle, I just changed it, is Coach Gioffre. Try to be a little bit more professional on there. You can see me with my random takes on watching football on a Sunday or some bullshit there, but I do post some training content on there as well from time to time.
Awesome. Well, go check Moss out. I learned a lot from him. If anybody is listening to this, you will learn a lot from him too. And thank you again, my friend.